morning. Welcome. My name is Nancy Lopez, and I am the Family Engagement Resource Teacher here for Elk Grove. And today we are on our fourth session, which is a writing. It's all about writing from preschool, kinder to about first grade. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our agenda. Like every meeting, we'll do an icebreaker on getting to know each other. We'll talk briefly about what worked well at our last session with high frequency words. And then we will talk about the new essential standard, which will be writing. I'll show you examples today of what a kinder writing and a first grade writing looks like, and we'll talk about what different things we want to look at and how it will progress. And then we'll do a little practice on organizing writing for our students. Then we'll do a quick summary and just do a little recognition at the end of our 4 sessions, okay? Today, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the writing. And this up here is one of the Common Core writing standards for kindergarten, okay? So the reason why I'm going to show you this is because I want you just to pay close attention to this part right here where it says, use a combination of drawing, dictating, and writing to narrate a single event or several loosely linked events. Tell about the events in order in which they occurred and provide a reaction to what happened. Okay, so I know that this is a lot going on there. But if we break this down and we just talk about the drawing right here, that's the first stage. And if we even break it down further, we can even talk about when little kids, like maybe even the 10-month-old or the 1-year-old, when they're scribbling, that's writing to them. Okay, so we want to make sure that we recognize those stages of children when they're scribbling, and we recognize that that's writing for them. So in kindergarten, the first one right here, like I said, it's drawing. So even looking at their drawings, and when they're drawing and they're talking about their picture, that's writing. They're sharing a story. They're telling what's going on in the story, and they're thinking and drawing what they remember from the event that they're talking about, okay? Then next would be the dictating part, and that could be either them, talking about it, or us even writing as they're telling the story. And then finally, the writing piece. And again, the writing will look different in different stages. It might just be a scribble again with the drawing, or it might be a few letters with the sounds that they're saying. It might just be one word. It might just be a picture of the park and the child writing park. Okay, so it's a beginning stage, but it's what will it'll progress into a sentence. And I'll show you examples of what that's going to look like. Okay, so before we talk about this, I'm going to go ahead and hand out the folders here. So I'll give you 2 each. And then if you can open your folder and pull out this sheet, it's the 5-star writing. So it looks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk about all these 5-star writing. And your child's teacher might have already handed something similar to this. They have different ones online. I like this one because it's pretty simple, and a child, if you're working with your child on writing, you can just show them this, and they could probably go down the list when they look at their sentence. So the first one on here, it's capital letter to start my sentence. So we want to make sure that we remind our children when they're writing to start with the capital letter. Okay, it's always a big letter to start, and everything else is lowercase. When they're starting to write, a lot of times they use uppercase letters in all of their words, or when they're writing. So we want to just remind them that it's only the first letter is capital, or if it's their name or a proper noun that they're using in between their sentence. Okay. The second one is ending with the punctuation, and for the most part in kinder they use a period. Okay. Later on, they'll start, to figure out that if it's a question, it's a question mark, and if they're really excited about something, it's an exclamation mark, okay? The third one is using finger space, or some kind of space in between, okay? And that's one that takes time for children to develop. And I will show you a couple of strategies, or at least one strategy to help your child if they need help with the finger spacing or the spacing in between the words. And we want to make sure that it's a little space, because a lot of times they want to make a big space. So using finger is fine for finger spaces. The fourth one on here is neat handwriting, just making sure that they're writing correctly, their letters correctly. And again, a lot of times when they're beginning to write, they're going to write with big letters. And that's okay for a while. I will show you different ways to help with the big writing. But for the most part, we just want to make sure that they're forming the letters correctly. And then the last part is just making sure that the sentence makes sense. So going back to read the sentence, and then hopefully they can hear themselves if they made a mistake, or if they figure out something here that maybe they missed the capital, they can correct themselves, okay? So again, this is something you can use while they're writing to help them guide their sentence and support them, okay? So what I'm going to do next is, you can keep that out because I want you to kind of go through this when we're looking at these. So these are examples of student writing, okay? I want us together to look at the writing and then figure out what it is the child wrote. And then I want to go over the 5-star writing and see what they did well and what they may need help with, okay? So going back to that Common Core standard about drawing, dictating, and writing, I want you to look at the picture. And then just first, let's talk about the picture. What do you see here? A girl and pizza. Good. And then look at what she wrote here. What did she write? I like pizza. That's exactly what she wrote. I like pizza. Okay. So now I want you just to think, using the 5-star writing, what did she do well here? She started with a capital letter. Good. A period at the end. Spaces. Very good. Yeah. And for the most part, she wrote the letters correctly. This K, maybe I would say, hey, you know. One other thing I want to point out, I know that the word like is not spelled correctly. That's a high frequency word. If they have already been introduced to this word, I would maybe say, hey, that's a high frequency word. Let's go back and correct it. However, pizza is not a high frequency word. It's just a word that they will, have to know how to spell. But pizza, if you read it phonetically, it says pizza, okay? I would leave that alone in kindergarten. I wouldn't say too much about this because they use their sounds to spell. So this is a perfect example of, a simple kinder writing. It's actually pretty good because they actually did start with the, they have a lot of the 5-star writing. So this is a good example of what a kinder writing looks like around this time, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next one. Okay, this one's a little bit more tough to see, but if you look at the picture, let's look at the picture first. So this is the student, and then look at what he has here. What do you think that is? A computer? A cell phone? Yeah, okay. Okay, and then I want you to try and see if maybe you can, I'm going to help you with spacing. Okay, so like this word right here, what do you think that says? He, good job, he. And then how about this one? Has. Okay, he has. Okay, now this one I'm going to help you too. It says awesome. So he has awesome. Okay, remember we said this might be like a computer or something. Oh, I thought you said app. He has awesome app on his pad. Yeah, on his pad, on his iPad. So he has awesome app on his iPad. So, okay. Now I know, so let's go back first to talk about what did he do well? And think about that Common Core standard about the drawing, the dictating, and the writing. So he has a picture. He has some kind of writing on here. Obviously, I mean, we were able to read. His letters are written. They're not, scribbles, or they're actual letters. So if this was your child, what would you help your child with? Good, Yeah, to start with the capital. The punctuation, yeah. And the spaces, yeah. I would focus on spaces because he actually has a really good sentence here that goes with his drawing. It's just the spacing, okay? So I'm going to show you a quick way to help your child with spacing, okay? So I'm just going to pretend this is your paper, okay? Before they start writing on the paper that they're going to write with, I want you to use a pencil and draw 2 lines. So you're just going to draw 2 lines that go like this. Okay? So, so then you have them right. So let's just say we're writing the I like pizza. Okay, so they're going to write I, and then in each box they're going to write a word. Okay? So I like, and then pizza. Okay. So I like pizza. Okay, so when they're done, then either you can do it or your child can do it, is erase the lines. Okay? So then that way they see the spaces, and then also as they're writing, they're forced to move their hand. Okay? Now it's okay to also say finger space, but this I have found in the classroom that this has worked really well with students. And then eventually they'll remember that they have to move their hands, so then you won't have to do those lines. Okay? So this is one thing that you can do before they start writing is using those lines. As they get a little better, you can maybe do 4 lines so that the spaces start to get a little smaller. But it's okay to start with the 2 so that they move their hand. Okay? So that's a strategy you can use to help with the spacing. How about this one? So I, yeah. It's an apple tree. Good, yeah. I love my apple tree. So what would you, so let's talk about the good things. So 2 good things that this student did. Yep, they started with the capital and their spaces. Good. So now what would you help your child if they were writing like this? What would you tell your child? To not have uppercases, to use lowercase, yeah, lowercase letters. And the period at the end. Good, yeah. If your child is writing with uppercase letters all the time, it's okay to have an alphabet chart in front of them too, just to remind them. Like, oh, write the lowercase, okay? Do you notice how they wrote apple? Yeah, they wrote it phonetically, because if you say apple, you kind of do hear that H in there if you say apple, like a little bit. Yeah, I would leave this alone. If they're in kinder, I would not, correct them. Now, if they're in, 4th, 5th grade and they're writing like this, then yes, I would definitely say, hey, let's check how you write apple. But for a beginning reader, this is fine. As long as they're using the sounds they hear, that's okay. Okay? If they're writing, if they had written a W in here, then I would also say like, hey, let's sound out the word apple. Where do you hear that W? Because they should be writing what they hear. Okay, this was a little bit more advanced, so if you're seeing the progression of the writings. So first I want you to look again at the drawing. Now this one has labels. This is also really, really important for kinder, is to write labels on their picture. The labels will then help them create a sentence. So I encourage the kinders to write labels on their pictures, okay? So let's talk about this picture first. Where do you think they're at? Out at the park? Yeah, I see that they, drew the sky, the clouds, and then there's grass here. And then what does that say? Me, good. And then this looks like it's his friend Connor, because he wrote Connor right there. Okay, and then without reading this part, what do you think they're doing? Yeah, it looks like they're playing with a ball or some kind of sport, yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and try and read this. So, I went, Where are they at? They're at it looks like they're at the park, right? Are they inside? No, where are they? They are outside. Yeah, okay, so I went outside, okay, and then I played Frisbee, yeah, okay. So I went outside, I played Frisbee, okay? So again, good things that they did here. They started with a capital, they have spaces, they have a period. A couple things here that I would just maybe suggest is the high frequency words. This is supposed to be went. And if it's been introduced again, just remind them it's a high frequency word, let's spell it correctly. Outside, I mean, they use the sounds that they know here. So yeah, this one I would just maybe actually talk more about, well, what else did you do? Because it looks like they're writing. So I would say, like, who did you play Frisbee with? Oh, I played with Connor. So maybe they could even add more to their writing here, okay? But do you see how the I like pizza and then how now this, it's developing more? Yeah, so there's a big difference. The writing too, the formation of the letters is also improving, okay? Okay, this one is a little hard to see, but I'll help you here. Now, remember I was talking about the drawing piece, the drawing part of the Common Core? Okay, here I would actually even suggest more drawing so that we know more about what they're writing about. So that's just me, and then also maybe labeling. Okay, so I don't know if you can see here, but that's actually I. Okay, so let's see if we can read this together. So I like to play. Good job. I like to play. So it's M-I. So what do you think they're trying to write here? My. Yeah, they're trying to write my. I like to play my. Do you know, what does that say? Xbox 300. So I like to play my Xbox 300. And I like to play my Wii game. So here, when I first read this, I wasn't sure if it was Wii or WWE because it's also like a wrestling. I left it as WWE, but then when I was doing this workshop, someone said, hey, I think that might say Wii, like a Wii game. So that's, yeah. So I think it's actually a Wii game, but yeah, I like to play my Xbox to play, and I like to play my Wii game, okay? But I know it was a little difficult to see because it wasn't too clear, but they have a lot of good things in this writing, okay? So let's go back and maybe point some of those out. So what is it, something that they did very well here? There's spaces, yep, good spaces. Yep, they have a capital here, They have a period, punctuation, good, yeah. They have a good story with what they were writing. It wasn't just, I like to play my Wii or my Xbox. I mean, they went to, detail too. So it made sense. So what would you maybe help your child with on here? Some of these are capitals and they shouldn't be. So I would say that, yeah. Yeah, and then like here, they wrote a capital G and then the M. That's probably a capital I as well too. So I would maybe just fix those. You don't want to point out too many things. I would just maybe focus on one. If it's something that they're always doing, then that's that one thing. Like if they're writing with capitals, then that's what I would focus on for a while until they can do that on their own. Okay? Okay, this is going to be our last example. This one is a little more also with detail, and it's a little hard to see, so I'll help you out. But there's a lot of labels up here, okay? So that's what I was talking about, label etiquetas is what we would call them. So here they have light, they have mom, lamp, fan, me, lamp. Here it says dog. Oh, right here it says picture. It's P-I-S-H-E-R, picture, okay? Kitchen too, they wrote kitchen right here. They wrote it C-I-C-H-I-N, kitchen, okay? So again, that's all phonetic, okay? And that's fine because it does make sense. Okay, and they're writing it was a, so using sounds, so it's really, really. Okay, I'll help you with this one. It was a really, and then here they wrote cold, but they were working on changing the words to use words that they don't normally use. So they wrote actually chilly. It was a really chilly night in my classroom. I was freezing. And then here they were trying to write brr. So let's think again. What did they do very well here? The spaces, good spacing. They actually, it's actually a little heart. She had a little heart on top of the eye. So yeah, so no, yeah. So it's not capital, so I would say, hey, let's fix this to make it a capital. Yes. It was a really chilly night in my classroom. I was freezing. Yeah, this is actually a really good, a good sentence here because they talk about where they're at and what's going on, that they were freezing. And they actually even gave more detail too about the day. It was a really chilly day or a chilly night. And then at the end, she wrote brr. So this is a really, it's a more developed writing than from the first one we saw with I like pizza, okay? So all of these writings is some kind of event that the child was thinking about and writing about, okay? So it was, you know, the little boy that was out playing the Frisbee with Connor, the little girl that wrote I like pizza, that was something, you know, of herself that she liked pizza. The one about the Xbox, I like to play the Xbox. So it was very personal and it was about them. And so that's another thing that I want you to also remember, that, you know, if they're writing something that's meaningful to them or that they experience, they're going to write more of. You know, it's a little harder even for us to just kind of write about something we're not familiar with, okay? Okay. So what I want to do with you today to help your child with the writing and to develop more detail in their writing, I want you to go ahead and take this little sheet out. It's a blue sheet that you have. Okay, so one of the things that children will say is, well, I don't really know what to write about. So rather than us telling them, oh, well, you can write, you know, let's write this and this and that, you know, then it's like, okay, and then they will always become dependent on like coming to us and asking. So what I want to do is I want to just kind of brainstorm a couple of different ideas so that we can give them and then they can create their own story. And one of the things that I would do is I would always ask them when they would say, well, I don't know what to write about, is I would always start asking like, well, you know, who lives at home with you? Because that's usually who they would, you know, have stories about. Or who are your friends? Or your grandparents. If I knew that they, you know, would frequent their grandparents a lot, I would always start there. Or pets is another good one too that they always will write about. So on this first column right here, I want to think about either people or things or you know, friends, teachers. And the other thing too that I want to talk about is the more specific you are, the more writing or the more experiences they'll start to think about. So if you say grandma, I would suggest you say, you know, a specific name like, you know, Grandma Juanita, or, you know, or my friend. Well, who's your friend? Oh, my friend Jasmine. So be very specific. Okay, on this next column right here, we're going to talk about, well, where is this person or this friend? Where are they at? And again, the more specific you are, the better. So if they say, oh, well, we're at the park, that's fine. The park is fine. Usually, you know, they have a lot to write about the park. But if they say, oh, well, we're at the pizza place. Well, what pizza place? Chuck E. Cheese. So it makes it more detailed, okay? The last part right here would be, well, what are you doing there? So if they're at, you know, oh, I'm with my friend Jasmine, we're at Chuck E. Cheese. Well, what are you doing? Well, we're eating pizza. Or we're playing a game. So the more specific you are, the more writing they'll get. Now, I don't want you to write an entire sentence here. I just want ideas. So when they say, I don't know what to write about, then we pull this out and we say, well, look, we have, you know, Jasmine, Chuck E. Cheese, pizza. And then they can develop that sentence themselves, okay? So I'm going to give you maybe a minute or two just to kind of think about a couple of people here or, you know, things, and then 2 or 3 here, and then 2 or 3 here, okay? So I'll go ahead and, if it's okay, I'll just kind of share out one of the things that you wrote. So, so Jonathan, is Jonathan your son, or is that a friend? Okay, so Jonathan, and then the second word was park, and then the final word was running. Okay, so when he's ready to write, and then this, and you tell him these, he should be able just to make, he'll probably start with the drawing, But what other questions can you ask him so that he draws more or writes more? What else can you ask him while he's doing that? Who else is there with you? What did you do after? Yeah. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do is just ask more questions so that they answer them and they themselves are thinking of those things, okay? Rather than us telling them, you know, oh, well, why don't you draw, you know, that you played this after? So it's more asking the questions like, well, who else, you know, who are you with? What did you do after? Did you have fun? So things like that, okay? So this is something that you can just fill out as the days go, or if you go to a new place, you can remind them like, oh, hey, you know, this is somewhere we can write about this later. Let's remember to write it down in our organizer, okay? So in your folders, I also included a little book here. Okay, so a couple things with the book. There's on one page, there's a drawing already, and then on the back side, there's going to be a blank page, okay? So a couple things, I would encourage your child to draw more on these to put more detail. Like here, they could draw more people, or, you know, the teacher over here on this side. And just talking about the picture. Remember we talked about when we did the read aloud story, how we just kind of talked about the pictures. I would just start there too. You know, hey, what do you see here? Or what else can we add here? If your child is not writing sentences, you can maybe start with just the labeling. And then you know, wait a while and then come back so that they can write a simple sentence, okay? And then on the other side where the blank pages are at, this is where you can maybe use the graphic organizer and give them ideas so that they can draw those ideas on here, okay? Yeah, and then same thing, have them draw, have them label a couple of things on their paper, and then using those labels, they can maybe create a sentence, okay? This book, you don't have to, I mean, it's like 20 pages, so if you want to wait, like, I know that break is coming up, so if maybe you want to start during break, a couple of pages, or if you even want to save it for the summer, maybe, you know, they're already getting some writings, some homework in their writing, or they're writing in other, you know, in a notebook or something, then you can save it for the summer and then have something for them to do over the summer. The other thing too, just so that we're not, you know, making this another extra thing to do, is have them pick any page. You know, they don't have to go in order. Tell them to pick a page that they want to write about. You know, maybe, I know at the back, there's, you know, a page where it's snowing. Maybe, you know, right now because they're reading books about snow, or maybe they go to the snow, they can maybe write more about this rather than maybe, you know, like this page right here. So give them choices or options on like, well, let's, you know, do you want to draw a picture, or would you like to, you know, draw more on a picture that's already there, okay? Unless they're very structured and they want to go in order, then let them go in order. But if not, let them pick whatever page they want to write about. Okay, well, that's the end of the class. I just wanted to thank you for being here every class, every workshop, and here to learn new things for your child and your children. So I'm happy that you're here and you're participating, and that the things that you do at home with your children are coming back to the classroom, and so that's helping your child and the teacher. So it's a good thing, and I thank you very much.
The following program is a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools.
Students are raving about author Joan M. Wolfe's historical fiction novel, Runs with Courage.
And I really like how it's about an important time in history that nobody really knows about. It was really interesting. I thought the book was amazing. It always keeps you turning the page, and there's a lot of twists.
Welcome to Meet the Author. I'm your host, Emily Godfrey, and joining me today is Joan M. Wolfe, a professional teacher who also happens to be a published author. We'll be talking about her historical fiction novel, Runs with Courage, which received the Jefferson Cup honor by the Virginia Library Association. This award recognizes distinguished biography, American history, or historical fiction books for young people. Joan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk about your books.
Great to be here.
So before we begin, you are a teacher. Would you mind telling us what you teach and what grade levels?
Yes, right now I teach grades 1 through 5 technology. I'm a technology specialist, but I have taught everything from 2nd grade on up to 8th grade, and I've taught adults as well.
Do you have a favorite grade that you like to work with?
You know, it kind of depends. It's whatever grade I'm currently teaching. So right now,
Good
my
answer.
favorite is technology specialist.
Well, without giving too much away, can you tell us a little bit about Runs with Courage?
Yeah, Runs with Courage is about the residential boarding schools that were around in the 1800s and up through the early 1900s. Their purpose was to take Native American children and make them more Caucasian so that they could go out into the world and become Caucasian children.
Well, what inspired you to write this story?
Well, I grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota. It was a sacred ground for the Lakota people. I've loved the Black Hills. I knew a little bit about the Native American history, but not much until I was researching for a gold rush story that takes place in Deadwood in 1875, and discovered that the whole community of Deadwood was actually an illegal settlement because the Black Hills had been promised to the Lakota people in an earlier treaty.
Oh, wow.
And then when the gold rush came and all of the people came, our government just kind of forgot about the treaty and let the people come. So then I realized, it's like, oh, there is an interesting story there, and did more research and discovered the residential boarding schools.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about who are the Lakota people?
Yeah, the Lakota people are one of the Plains Native American tribes. There are, I believe, 7 different tribes, and they are one of them.
Why was this story important to tell?
Well, I think this story shows one part of our government's attempt to really destroy the culture of Native Americans and force them to assimilate and just get rid of their culture. And I think that's an important story to tell. Their first answer to doing that was to get rid of the buffalo. And they would encourage people to hunt buffalo. And the buffalo, the thing is that the way the settlers would hunt them is they would hunt them, and then all they wanted was the heads, the horns, the coats. They would leave the meat and everything just to rot. And then the second step that was taken was the reservation system. And the thing about the Lakota people is it was very much a system of giving to have. And if they had something, they shared it with the whole Teospe. And Teospe are the small family groups of a whole tribe. So the tribe is like the big group, and then Teospe are the small family units that would live together. So when one person would have something, they would share it with others, and then that's how they would get things back. But the reservation system really changed their economy to one of getting to have, and no longer kind of that sharing thing. It was rations, it was being forced onto squares of land. Hunting was a huge part of the Lakota culture. I mean, that was their lifeblood. You know, they hunted. Once they were on the reservations, there really wasn't much to hunt. There was some game, but not much. They were given cattle like rations, but the cattle were dead. You know, they'd already been killed because, again, that was something that was part of our culture. Was you don't hunt the cows, you just eat the dead ones. Unfortunately, sometimes the cows were killed, and then they were just left before they were shipped, and so the meat was rotted, and that would poison people and kill them. And then, kind of the next step of that was, well, we need to teach the children how to be more like, you know, how to become part of our culture. And so the way that you do that is you just eradicate the culture. And Colonel Pratt was one of the first boarding schools. He started one of the first boarding schools in Pennsylvania, the Carlisle School, and his motto was "Kill the Indian, save the man." And so they would do things, when the kids came, they would cut their hair super short. And for Native Americans...
Yeah, you mentioned that in the book several times, how that was like traumatic.
Yeah, and Native Americans, different tribes have different beliefs, but Lakota, their hair would be long unless they were in mourning. They'd never cut it. But that was the first thing they would do, is they would cut the kids' hair and dress them in clothing that they weren't used to. They weren't used to anything. It was a completely different kind of culture. And I think that just, I didn't realize, I guess, the extent that our government went to really eradicate culture.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the lessons that the students would learn in school? Or like the types of curriculum, maybe?
Yeah,
that they
well,
would go
and
through?
in the 1800s, and that's really the area that I know more about. I don't know much about the boarding schools as much in the 1950s. But it was, there was not the separation of church and state. And so, God was very important, and that was a big part of the boarding schools. The other thing is that a number of the boarding schools were run by Christian missionaries, and so it was all about the white God, or just God. And again, for Lakota people, they have a sense and had a sense of spirit is in everything. And there's spirit in trees, there's spirit in animals. There isn't necessarily like one God that's separate from everything else. God is in everything. And so I think it was very confusing for the children. And then for Winds in my book, she's confused because of the crucifixion of Christ. And, just, it was such a different way of looking at things. And there was no integration. It was, our way is right and your way is wrong. And if you don't believe our way, then we're going to beat you, and we're going to, make sure that you submit to what we think is correct, what we think is right.
And there was no like easing into that. Like in the story, Four Winds, it's like, you're there now, this is starting. There was no introduction.
Exactly, exactly.
At Colin Powell Elementary School, students are reading Joan's book, Runs with Courage. Let's check it out.
I really loved the book Runs with Courage because I really admired how Four Winds was able to have the courage to run back to her Tiospe. But not only that, what I admired even more was that she found the courage again to go back to where the whites were teaching her, to get to know them and to try and be able to teach her tribe the ways of the whites too.
Four Winds, the main character, was really brave and strong, that she could go through all these things that happen in the book and still hold on to her personality.
I really like how William pretended to be slow around the whites so he could keep his culture close to him when he was in the shed. I thought that was really smart.
I thought the book was amazing. It always keeps you turning the page, and there's a lot of twists. There's a really good plot with lots of interesting characters, and I thought Four Winds is like very brave and courageous.
I really like how it's about an important time in history that nobody really knows about. It was really interesting.
We are back with author Joan M. Wolfe. In the story, Four Winds sees things with fresh eyes almost, like she kind of is experiencing things for the first time, a lot of things that we take for granted. Was that hard to write about?
Very hard, because again, it's that authenticity, and I'm writing about something that I didn't experience. I want it to be an authentic, situation. And so I did the research as best I could. I also had 2 women vet my story. One is a Lakota woman who teaches Native American studies in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and another woman, her husband, who unfortunately passed away, but he was Dakota, and so her children and grandchildren are Dakota, and she just knows so much about that culture. And so they both read my book for authenticity and found a few things, and it's like, oh yeah, sorry, there's, to help me make sure that it was culturally accurate.
Why is cultural identity so important?
Well, I think that cultural identity it's a collection of our stories that make us who we are. And so it's so important to be able to maintain those stories because it tells who we are as unique individuals and unique cultures.
And what happens when it's lost or erased?
We lose our stories.
I think that many students will find Four Winds to be a really inspiring character, and they'll have a lot to relate to her with. Can you tell me more about how you wrote her, like what you were inspired you to create this character?
Well, I was inspired by just learning about the children who had been through these schools and learning some of their stories. And many of the children really fought to maintain their cultural identity. And so I began to kind of see and hear a child and the experiences that she would have had. And then part of it is just good writing and trying to show a character, trying to help the reader experience things as if they were the character experiencing it for him or herself.
It sounds like you had to do a lot of research for this book, and that sometimes can be very difficult, especially for our students. Can you talk a little bit about your research process and where you found this information or these personal stories of children?
Yes. My research actually began with, I connected with a woman who is Lakota, and she was managing a Native American bookstore at the time. And so I was talking to her about Native Americans and about this story, and she began by referencing me, sent me in the direction of a bunch of wonderful, wonderful books that she would highly recommend about the Lakota people in general, and then about the residential boarding school as well. So that's where I started. And then I glommed onto anything that I could get a hold of, but I wanted to make sure that my sources were authentic Lakota. I watched documentaries, I went to several museums. Online, there's a number of different collections. There's the Memory Collection, there's the Library of Congress collection. The Native Americans and Lakota, they don't have a written history. It's all oral and pictorial. So
that's interesting.
So there wasn't a lot of, there is not a lot of written histories, but there's a lot of picture histories and a lot of that sort of thing. So I did as much as I could to find those.
And did you speak with any prominent figures that gave you personal stories and narratives, or?
No, the prominent figures were more from different books that I read and different accounts in that way.
How did you begin to organize yourself to do this research? It sounds like there were lots and lots of sources to comb through.
Yeah, it's really hard. And the thing about historical fiction is I think that the author has a unique responsibility to making sure that the history is accurate, because when people, even, doesn't matter if it's kids or adults, when they read historical fiction, they kind of forget the fiction part and focus on the history. And so to organize, I just start by just kind of reading everything I can, taking notes, and then I organize my notes into different aspects of the culture. Decide where I'm going to start with the story. Sometimes that is where I end up starting. Sometimes the start ends up being more the middle or the end of the story, and just kind of go from there.
I know that with my students, they are often really inspired to learn more about the true events when they read a historical fiction novel. So I think it is really important to be accurate and have true information, because you don't want to start off with a false belief of something.
Yeah. Particularly, I think, when you're writing about a cultural story, and this is definitely a cultural story.
Do you model the research process with your students? And is it similar to the way that you did your own research?
Well, it's interesting because I have taught writing and I have taught reading. I haven't taught those for a number of years now because I'm teaching technology. But when I taught kids writing, absolutely. And I would research right along with them and talk about, well, when I do this and that sort of thing, so that they could see how I was doing things. I would bring my I still do actually bring my manuscripts in so kids can see them, and I whine to them about the writing process. It's like, yeah, I don't want to hear how hard it is to write 2 pages because I have to write 50. But yeah, definitely.
Let's find out what our MTA crew learned on a recent visit to Colin Powell Elementary School.
So the students were given the assignment to read Runs with Courage, and after they finished the book, they worked in groups, 6 groups of 5. The assignment was to think about the book and come up with a creative way to report it back to the class. So each of the 6 groups developed something entirely different, from digital to paper to posters.
After reading the book Runs with Courage, we decided to make a flip book. The first page is when Four Winds gets taken away from her tribe to the white boarding school. After reading the book Runs with Courage, we decided to make a chronological order model of the main events in the book. In this section, you will see Runs with Courage, eating lunch with her friends, walks tall, and moon awake. I took a small bite and discovered it tasted a little sweet. It tasted so good, I hungrily gobbled the entire piece. Page 30.
Our group just finished reading Runs with Courage and thought it sounded a lot like a movie.
And every great movie has an even better trailer.
So we decided to make our own trailer.
My name is Four Winds, and this is my story.
They took me away from my family. They burned what I had left from them. They changed me into someone I didn't recognize.
For our project, we decided to make like a 3-dimensional poster.
In the second scene, Runs with Courage is going down to the office to get some sewing supplies, but then she sees a sign that says, "Kill the Indian, save the man," which is on page 81. With confusion and anger, she breaks the sign, and that gets her in a ton of trouble.
For the past couple of weeks, our group has been working on a movie trailer poster about this awesome book, Runs with Courage. We really enjoyed reading it, and we know you will too. Here's our thoughts about the book.
This is the cover of the book, and what we think is that the mountains Four Winds is facing is the obstacle she had to go through.
So we decided to rate this book. We rated it PG because there's some complex words that little kids won't understand. Also, we rated it 5 stars because it was so fabulous. We enjoyed it so much, and we want everyone to read this book.
Now selling in bookstores near you.
We are back with author Joan M. Wolfe. So writers approach their work in many different ways. As a teacher, is your writing process similar or different than your students?
Well, it's a little bit of both. And I think for kids, they don't have the luxury of the time that I have. I'm able to start something and then just keep going with it, whereas kids have deadlines and they have like a week to get finished or that sort of thing. One thing that I have done with kids when I taught 4th grade, and I think it was really important, I had the kids create a rough draft and do as much as they could on it, and then set it aside for a couple of weeks, and then we went back to it.
That's nice, because it gives them time to reflect and think about it.
And a fresh eye. It's hard for anybody to revise, especially for kids. I think it's really hard to revise. But if you've had a chance to step away from it and then you come back to it, it's like, oh yeah, that wasn't the best, and yeah, I could change that, and that whole thing.
Do you have a favorite part of the writing process, or better, like a least favorite part of the writing process to share?
I think every process is hard. I really do. And like right now I'm in the middle of trying to write my next novel. And so I'm in that very beginning stage, trying to kind of find the story. And it's so hard. And it's like, okay, it's okay though, because it'll get better. The next stage, the revision stage will be better. And then I get to the revision stage and it's like, oh, this is so hard. It's just so hard. Why am I a writer? And I think, oh, but it'll be better when I get to the next stage. So they're all different. They all have challenges. I kind of like them all. for different reasons. There's not really one that's my favorite versus another one.
And Runs with Courage was not your first published book for young people. Can you tell us a little bit about your first novel, Someone Named Eva?
Yes, Someone Named Eva is also a historical fiction book, and it actually takes place during World War II. It's inspired by a true event that took place in Ligica, Czechoslovakia. And it's actually about the Lebensborn program, which was a program that Himmler, one of Hitler's men, started. And the purpose of that program was to take children who weren't German, but they had the Aryan characteristics, and put them into a school and train them to be German, and then send them off to be good German citizens. There are some parallels between the two stories.
Well, is historical fiction your favorite genre?
You know, I kind of fell into writing it. That's all that I've been writing. Growing up, I preferred to read fantasy, so I never thought I would become a historical fiction writer. But yeah, right now it's my favorite. Yep.
Do you have any plans to write any fantasy novels anytime soon?
Kind of. I started one, and my agent said it was terrible.
Oh no!
So it's aside for right now. But at some point, yeah, I'd like to go back to that for sure. Yeah.
When teachers model the writing process, they often use published authors. Do you have a favorite author that you like to use as a mentor text in the classroom?
I have a lot of favorite authors. I don't use one author specifically. It's more just a collection of books. One thing I'm really fascinated about with writers is those who have the ability to take characters and really show transformation and change. And so, like The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi kind of shows that change. And I love Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy by Gary Schmidt. And that also shows some change with one of the characters who's really kind of a jerk in the beginning. And then by the end, you really are rooting for this character. And The Book Thief is for older kids and adults. But again, it's like there's a character in there that you start off going, oh, I really don't like this character. And then by the end, you're like, yeah. And then for littler kids, Click Clack Moo, Doreen Cronin, she has been writing books for younger kids, The Trouble with Chickens and Chicken Trouble, and I can't remember all of those.
Yeah, those are some of my favorites.
Oh my gosh, they're so awesome. They're funny, and I have all of those as my own personal mentor texts that I look at when I'm writing to see how to do different techniques and things.
So if practice makes perfect, do you write every day?
I do. Sometimes it's just little bits and times. When you're a teacher, it's the energy, that is really, I don't always have a lot of energy. But yes, every day, sitting down and writing something.
Do you have a space that you dedicate to do your work?
I do. I have a loft, and it's wonderful. It's my writing spot.
So what are you working on currently?
I am working on another historical fiction novel, of course. And it's a girl for a character, but it has nothing to do with schools, this one. So, and it's 14th century France.
Oh, wow. Can you tell us any more or no?
That's about it. Yeah.
We'll have to wait.
Doesn't even have a title yet. So
how do you encourage the use of active voice versus passive voice with your students when they write?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And sometimes I still kind of struggle with that myself. But it's more just having the students write from the character's perspective and not what's happening to the character, but how the character is experiencing it.
I think you mentioned that earlier, like you like to show what's happening to a character and how they change and not tell.
Exactly. It's that old adage, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. Yep.
Do you think that texting and email and Twitter have changed the way language is used and developed with kids?
Absolutely it has. Absolutely it has. And I've been thinking about that, and especially since I'm a technology specialist. And I there are people who feel like it's the evil of the world and it's ruined everything. And I don't know that it's ruined it, but it has definitely changed it. And I think it's made things shorter and in smaller bites. But I still see great books being published that are beautiful and long and elegant in their texts and in their sentences and that sort of thing. So I guess it's changed. I'm just not sure if it's a positive or negative at this point.
Well, it's almost like learning another language, right? So it's like you have your your texting and your social media language, and then the one that you want to use at other times as well.
And it's almost like we talk about code switching.
Yeah.
And it's almost kind of like that. It's like, okay, texting is fine in this situation, but now in this situation, we're not going to write a story or an essay using texting. Yeah.
So what do you think is the key to good writing instruction?
Well, one thing, and I don't know that teachers will be thrilled to hear me say this, but I think it's important that teachers write themselves, and not necessarily that they have to publish or they have to go, through everything, but to do what they're asking kids to do really helps them understand, I think, a little bit more about the process and a little bit more about what kids are going through. I used to teach an adult class, a graduate class, and it was teachers as writers, writers as teachers. And I would make them do exactly what we make kids do. And it was so fascinating to see these teachers that, they're the masters of their classroom and they're very confident in their assignments and everything. And they would get just as frightened and scared and insecure when they were working on their own writing as the kids do. So I think that's important. It's really important.
And how do you encourage students to write who have challenges with language?
That's a tough one. And again, I was working with an adult writer who was from a Middle Eastern country, and she was really struggling with trying to write. She said, in my culture, we have 20 different words that mean cool. And in this culture, like cool means cool. So what words do I choose? And what I did with her was she would do a mix of writing in her home language and writing in English, and then worked to kind of transform it into English so that English speakers could read it. And I think with little kids that are struggling with language, letting them write in their home language can help. And then also them speaking it out loud to somebody so that you do the writing. Because I think for language, it becomes as much as about mechanics, more than like the thought process kind of thing. You don't want that to stop the thought process.
Well, we are almost out of time, but before we go, do you have any last-minute advice for our aspiring writers?
I would say read a lot, and read everything, like things you like and things you don't like, and then write a lot, write every day.
Joan, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
To learn more about Joan M. Wolf, visit her website. If you'd like to learn more about our upcoming programs, visit us on the web. For the Fairfax Network, I'm Emily Godfrey. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming.